right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the CV Update. As promised, we are back today to recap the Patriots' very disappointing 27-17 loss to the Indianapolis Colts last night that pushes the Patriots down from the number 1 seed to the number 3 seed. And though they will still be atop the AFC East division by the end of this week, as they are still 1.5 games ahead of the Buffalo Bills. And we will recap this game last night and also look ahead to the relevant AFC matchups today and who we'll be supporting. And joining me for today's episode are Anirban Chakraborty, Rohan Venkatesh, and Ujan Talukdar. Guys, tough loss last night. How are you all holding up now? Feeling a little bit better?
I'm glad we got it out of the way. It was going to happen at some point, and I'm not going to lie about just how atrocious it was. But I'm just glad it happened now and say not like during the playoffs or something. But, got to give credit to Vegas, right? Because, I had the Patriots winning 24-21. So, obviously I ended up being wrong about that. And so I guess Vegas saw something that I didn't see. I coming in, I thought that the Patriots were going to pull it off just because they were so hot and they were perfect on the road. And then you get last night. So there were a lot of factors in there. We'll get into that more. Obviously, the run game, defense not really showing up, a lot of stupid errors. But if it had to happen, I'd rather have it happen right now. And the only thing that I'm going to be asking in the future is this a blip or is this a sign of further trouble to come? So that's the only thing I gotta figure out in the future. But anyway, it's good to be here on this day after the massacre, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm holding up okay after my stint on some of the on one of the famous Boston radio stations last night. Of course, not having the 1 seed kind of hurts, but still having the AFC's division lead is some sort of silver lining still. But ideally, I would like to have the 1 seed and just kind of head into today feeling relaxed, watching the games, knowing that no matter what happens, we'll still be the 1 seed. But now we know that's not going to happen. So it just adds a little more pressure as to what happens today. But, it's, of course, Mac Jones throwing the ball more than 40 times, it just wasn't ideal. He had to do it early in the season. We know what happened. Now it's happened again. And it kind of feels like the same thing is happening. And, it just shows that Mac Jones throwing the ball so much, that's not the formula for Patriots winning.
Yeah, in the moment, of course, not happy with it. We all know. I think yesterday we were feeling pretty good about entering the game. But at the end of the day, I like to think, if we lost, are there still positives that we can take away from the game? Or are there any ways that we can see us learning things that'll be helpful later in the season? And I think we did at least accomplish that. I think it was maybe it's not the worst thing to have a game here where we kind of saw firsthand a pretty poor first half performance and kind of forcing the team to kind of rebound and adjust. And even though they didn't end up being able to make it back all the way in the end, I think at least we were able to learn about this team. And I think even with Mac Jones, I think we were able to see like a really strong, at least the last 1.5 quarters of the game, although he definitely started definitely looking kind of like in this like kind of starstruck, you could say. But at the end of the day, I'm not really feeling as bad. Honestly, if anything, I'm sure we'll talk about it. I definitely think that this is probably one of the better scenarios we could have had for like if we were to lose one of the last like 4 or 5 games of the season. I think it's better if we kind of lost this one versus like losing against the Bills or something 2 weeks ago, and maybe it's gonna light a fire under their belly for, you get complacent. All said and done, I guess something you just never account for is with 7 wins. Sometimes it's good to have like 6 wins. It's sometimes good to have like a little moment to like pause and say, okay, like maybe we were a little overconfident. Maybe we need to get our focus back. So I think that can only help us for the final games before the playoffs.
Yeah, and I gotta say, a lot of it had to do with the fact that Indianapolis, they had a much better run game. Passing game wise, Patriots while they weren't too great, I mean, like it wasn't too great for the Colts either. Like, I mean, like Carson Wentz is like 5-12 or something like that. But given all of that, I mean, if you just boil it down to all of the stupid mistakes that the Patriots made, for example, that the punt, just the like atrocious punt, and then like the couple of picks that Mac Jones threw. I mean, obviously picks are a little bit harder, right? But things like punting, that's just like a basic skill that needs to be like perfected. And when stuff
I
like
will
that,
say one thing about the blocked punt. That is the third blocked punt allowed by the Patriots this season. No other team
the
has
second one recovered by Speed. First time is
Yeah.
one guy's done it 2 times since
But
since
I mean,
since
this
03.
season, the Patriots have had 3 blocked punts on
But
them.
it's not just this. I mean, early on in the season, I was talking about like fumbling and ball security, and I was saying early on in the season.
Problem. That's what I'm trying to say. This is a recurring problem now.
So I mean, it's a problem of getting back to fundamentals, right? It's not a quality issue. It's just a practice issue. So that when it happens, it looks really bad, but it's probably also one of the easiest things to fix.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, it was like just very uncharacteristic performances. It wasn't just like the block punt. They like, I mean, jumping off sides by Brandon King, right? The jump off sides on the missed field goal. He missed a 46-yard field goal, and it was 17-0. And then offsides, like you can't have that. Like I was shocked that these were the types of penalties. They had multiple false starts on the 3rd and 1 that pushed them to 3rd and 6. On the play where it was 20-7 in the 3rd quarter and they kicked that field goal to make it 20-10. They actually had it 3rd and 1. Onwenu had a false start, pushed them to 3rd and 6. They didn't get it, and then they had to kick a field goal. That was huge. It was just all these uncharacteristic penalties that were going on. Isaiah Wynn, Michael Onwenu, very poor performances this game. Like overall, it was a very just like shocking type of game. Isaiah Wynn in one play actually ran into Ramondre Stevenson during a run, and basically he was the reason Ramondre Stevenson got tackled. Like, do you remember that play? Like, I was like, initially I had to watch it again. I was like, did Ramondre Stevenson just like run into his own guy? Like, this was just uncharacteristic, sloppy football that's just inexcusable. Like, I mean, that type of stuff was just like, you can't have that. Like, and then like, I mean, the defense was fine, but I mean, that Jonathan Taylor run at the end, like that was just a backbreaker at that point. It was 20-17. You had them and all you needed is a field goal at that point, right? You get 2 stops because it was 2nd and 8. You get 2 stops and you force the punt. You need to just go 40, 50 yards to get a field goal. I think that was totally doable based on how Mac Jones was doing in the 4th quarter. And then, but here's the real thing I just want to mention. You know who was not on that field during the final Taylor run? Kyle Duggar, who's one of the Patriots' better run stoppers. And why wasn't he on the field? Because he got into a fight with Michael Pittman Jr. I am wondering, what are you doing, Kyle Duggar, at this point? You are such an important piece to this defense, and you just get into a fight with someone. Granted, Pittman also got ejected.
Well, at least Pittman also got ejected. So
yeah, but I mean, it doesn't. I don't know. Like, I mean, you're such an important player to this team, and you just selfishly go out. Like, I don't know what happened, but I mean, clearly, I mean, trying to get into a fight at this time.
That wasn't only skirmish. Like Carson Wentz and Matthew Judon, of course, that one apparently got a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there was just all sorts of uncharacteristic things. Like when do you hear about Patriots players getting ejected from games? When do you hear about them committing offsides penalties to negate a missed field goal? You don't see that stuff. Like this was just and the block punt, 3rd time this season, as I mentioned. No other team has more than 1. This is the worst like special teams then in this regard then when it comes to like preventing these block punts from happening. 3rd time. And Jake Bailey this season, he hasn't been very good. Like there's all sorts of things that have kind of just like sort of like came up yesterday. Like maybe, I mean, and it's good that it happened now and not in the playoffs, as you said, Rohan, but I can't like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, it was just a very disappointing performance. Mac Jones also, like, I know he played better in the 4th quarter, but I mean, that interception he threw right before halftime to Darius Leonard, I was like, that was a horrible, like just awful decision to throw that. And then the second interception by Bobby Ori, I'm gonna mispronounce
that one. I gotta give I gotta give credit to the defense though because he didn't look like he was anywhere near the ball. It was like a last fraction of a second. He kind of made this like diving catch. It almost looked like he was coming out of nowhere. So I mean, I would say that's more credit to the defense than saying that it was a bad pass.
Bobby Okereke, that was his name, Okereke. Yeah, he was the one who actually criticized Mac Jones pregame, and guess what? He actually backed up his words. He got an interception this game, a pretty big interception. So yeah, the Colts were just the better team today. Like that doesn't mean like I feel like if these teams meet again in the playoffs, I'm not going to be like as worried about the Colts, but I will. I mean, they have my.
Oh yeah, because the Patriots know what they messed up on, what they need to fix, and on the fundamentals, it would have been a lot more evenly matched because, like as I said before, running game advantage Indy, like passing game slight like advantage Patriots, defense ginormous advantage Patriots. So on the fundamentals, it kind of would have balanced out. But I mean, when you throw stupidity to the game, that's a game changer, and that's pretty much what handed it to Indy. I mean, granted, I can't get through this without giving credit to Indy because they definitely did play well. But was this winnable? I think so, and I kind of think that this was a blown effort. But but on the flip side, I think that if the Patriots somehow had won, a lot of these issues would have been swept under the rug. So it may not actually be a bad thing that they lost yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, especially for the first, honestly, 3 quarters of the game, I really got the vibe of what it feels like to play against the Patriots when we're actually humming along, forcing, and in this case, like forcing the other team to make mistakes and kind of beat themselves up, like how we had like 2 interceptions, and you're right that the second one to Bolton like was just fantastic defending as well, but when you think about the fact that you think about that first touchdown drive, that was a very gritty, let's give the ball to Jonathan Taylor and force them to defend against us. I mean, I was just watching that. I was like, wow, like I feel like I'm watching us against Buffalo. We know that they're going to run with Taylor, and we can't do anything about it because he's just that kind of guy. And not just that, but we saw like again the blocking. I was saying earlier yesterday that we had to watch out for the Colts' ability to set the edge. Their ability to use their big offensive line players to create the lanes for Jonathan Taylor to get through. And then once he's through, we saw that time and time again. We thought he'd stuck, and then he gets another 4 or 5 yards. Then all of a sudden, you go from a 2nd and 10 to a 2nd and 5. So I think it was literally like what I felt like I was seeing against Buffalo. They just had an O line that was just absolutely pounding us. That was basically setting the edges. They weren't letting us block in the way we wanted to, and honestly, it was really. I mean, I think this is the type of game where like yeah, obviously, like I think the penalties that we lost dozens and dozens of critical yards across like 8 different penalties. In the context that you already mentioned, but I think also like just recognizing that I think Frank Reich just did like a really phenomenal job being able to coach against this like Bill Belichick defense, and also, I guess against the offense as well. I mean, we saw like a few plays where we tried to run the ball early in the game, and it just like we weren't finding the space to do it. And like Ramondre was struggling to get 3 or 4 yards in general. And only later in the game we saw some plays open up where Brandon Bolton had 10 or 11 yard runs. But even early in the game, that wasn't happening. So all said and done, I wonder if maybe it's a game where we got a little figured out a bit, and you really have to take your hat off to some. I think that, I mean, all said and done, the Colts were just maybe a better coach team. They had a better game plan entering this, and at the end of the day, like I was really bummed out when we lost when Taylor had the 67-yard touchdown. But what I'm saying is when you leave the final result of the game to like a hopeful stop with like a minute on the clock, that's your fault for getting in that situation. So we can say like it was disappointing because we felt like we had the chance to come back. But like what Rohan said is, we got into this hole. We went into a 20-0 hole because of the mistakes that we were making, and you have to be able to address that. So I'm happy that we kind of let it all out in one game. We had a punt return touchdown. We had 2 picks from Mac Jones. We had all this thing, but at least we can definitely keep in mind that I can definitely expect a chip on our shoulder when we're going to play Buffalo and Gillette in a few days. And if you listen to the press conferences, I think you do hear a lot of accountability. You hear Mac Jones saying that he's going to learn from this, that he's going to learn from the picks. You see Hunter Henry, like someone asked him, like, hey, how do you feel about losing despite the great comeback you had? He's like, well, we lost. That's all that matters. So I think having the accountability and learning from that.
How you lost also matters. I would argue that how you lost also like matters a lot more. How you win, how you lose in terms of
no, they matter. I guess I was saying more in the example of accountability. That I didn't see anyone hiding behind the fact that we tried, we almost made it. I think that was a positive, and of course how you lose that matters. Like I think though, like if we just say we just lost by 10 points, I think that does ignore the fact that we at least did see a better Patriots team for 1.5 quarters. But again, that's the problem, right? You saw a better team for 1.5 quarters, but we were in a situation where we had to be absolutely perfect there because we played so poorly again to the hole in the first place.
Well, yeah, because I mean, like if it weren't that lopsided at that point, like late in the game, and if the Patriots were leading, they very likely don't have to pass the ball, and you're not putting Mac Jones in that risky situation. Granted, I'm sorry, never mind. Not. So I'm saying like you're putting yourself in a position where the defense could have more easily like made that stop, right, if they weren't in that risky situation late in the game. And as you said, like it is kind of the Patriots' fault that they got themselves stuck in that situation late. And I mean, credit to the Colts, right? They did a lot of the same things that I kind of felt that they would do, right? They got the lead, and then they just ran the ball, and then they ran the clock out, and then when it was time, they stuck that final dagger in the Patriots' hearts by getting that late touchdown. But
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
but so it was a really combination of firing on all these cylinders, and Colts not only won it from a fundamental standpoint, they also won it strategically, tactically, and of course they were able to capitalize on the Patriots' mistakes. So it's just an all around comprehensive performance by the Colts. You got to give it to them, and credit to Indy for doing that.
Credit, and I mean, it's been a long time since we've been behind by like 2 or more scores in a game. Like it really has.
First time in 100 games or so. There's a 99 game streak or something where the Patriots at least.
Well, that was where they scored in the first. Well, that's where they scored
in the first half, right?
But
then,
like,
of course, first loss to Indy since 09. So a lot of streaks got broken yesterday.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's my point. You know, we haven't played from behind in a while. Like, and especially when you have a young quarterback, right? 6 or 7 games in the NFL. That's a long time to just not experience that scenario. So overall, like I said, out of all the ways, like I'm would much rather have lost this game than having lost against the Bills. You know, so like at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, we lost and it wasn't a great performance, but what can we learn from it? Does this kind of teach Mac Jones? It gives him valuable experience about playing 20-0 down. I mean, there's going to be times in his career when he's going to do like that. So at the end of the day, I think it's important to say, what can we learn from it and how can we be a better team with this defeat?
I think overall it was just I mean, while a lot of things went wrong, I would say that the 2 things that I genuinely dislike were the blocked punt, which just almost never happens with a Bill Belichick coach team like before this season, and the pick before halftime. Because and I bring up that pick because if you take us, like, let's say if Mac Jones gets sacked, at the very worst, you kick a field goal, right? From 17-0, you're 17. It's now 17-3. So now you knocked it down from 3 possessions to 2 possession game, right? And that's just before halftime. And it was a pretty good drive, at least that drive at the end of the first half. Like, you were actually driving down. Like, and if you kick a field goal at 17-3, you know, at least, and you get the ball back to start the second half, maybe you don't throw a pick to start the second half, maybe you do. But at least the fact that you have the confidence to at least you say, oh, we can drive down the field. Like, between the 30s, I didn't really think we were awful, but I would say that after the first quarter, we outscored the Colts. What was it, like 17-13? It was 14-0 after the first quarter. So I don't think the defense played terribly after the first quarter. And that, granted, of the 7 points, 7 were from the block punt. So it's really, I can't really fault the defense too much. I mean, it was kind of inevitable that Jonathan Taylor would score a touchdown. So I wasn't entirely unhappy about that. It was just more like these small things. And also, that also being said, I wasn't entirely unhappy with the, like, after the game with the whole like offside on the field goal, because later on Indianapolis did miss a field goal. I know it could have, I mean, if you add both of those up, now you're talking maybe a 7-point game and it could have been closer. Maybe you're talking perhaps an overtime, you know what I mean? So overall, I would say it was definitely like I would say at best 4 out of 10 performance. I mean, having the interception in the red zone really was bad. Well, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving them 4. That's generous.
Well, the thing is, like, that being, like, of course, the block punt is not good. The defense was not good. The offense showed life in the fourth quarter. I give them that. Hunter Henry catching 2 touchdowns. I'm like, well, the last time Hunter Henry had 2 touchdowns, we won a game. I remember he had a game against Cleveland, had that sort of game against Cleveland. I mean, it's a game of 4 quarters. It's not a game of 1 quarter. It's not a game of 3 quarters, you know? So I'll give the Patriots credit where it's due, but overall, I would say 4 out of 10 is, I would say, a fair score.
Yeah, I mean that sounds about right. I mean, I'd probably have to go with like a 3 or maybe a 2, just because of like all the fundamental mistakes and just how bad that possibly gets. And of course, I mean, it was kind of a costly game too, in the sense that after the last game against the Bills, I mean, we ended up losing Damian Harris, so our run game was kind of crippled, and looks like now our receiving game is going to be a little bit more crippled as well, because it looks like Nelson Aguilar is going to be gone. So if that's the only that's probably the only long-term sign of trouble that I see, because I kind of mentioned yesterday that pair gelling and working together is going to be the key to victory. Obviously, that didn't happen. Of course, Hunter Henry, he did make those two receptions. So I mean, there are other avenues, but it's looking like it's going to get a lot harder, and that just puts a lot more pressure on the defense. So I mean, yeah, can they still pull it off? Sure, but I would say that's probably worrying.
Yeah, also, I just wanted to mention some of the key statistics from this game. So Carson Wentz, he was actually just 5 of 12 in this game. So he actually didn't even complete 50% of his passes. 57 yards, 1 touchdown, the 1 interception, which was a terrific play, excuse me, by Jamie Collins to deflect it. And then Devin McCourty made an outstanding interception there. So the defense was like pretty like solid for the most part, like other than the Hines touchdown drive in the first quarter. And then Jonathan Taylor in the end, 29 carries for 170 yards, but 67 of those came on that game-clinching run. So he really had 28 carries for 103 yards. If I put it like that, that sounds pretty acceptable, right? To allow to Jonathan Taylor no touchdowns at that point. So I thought the defense did a decent job kind of limiting him until that one run late, unfortunately. So I would say the defense, I would give them like a better score, but I mean, the offense, I have to kind of deduct a lot of marks. Then the special teams was pretty terrible this game. So yeah, I mean, I'd say maybe I'd give them like a 4.5 or maybe a 5, like partial credit. Like, I mean, I think the drive and the grit they showed in the fourth quarter was pretty good. Like, I mean, being down 20-0 on the road, you make it 20-17, and you're in position at that point prior to that Taylor run to do it. But then, like, I mean, I don't know, the defense, like, I mean, Kyle Duggar getting to a fight, I can't ignore that. Like that's like inexcusable to have, like, for like any team. Like, that's the type of things we usually make fun of the opposing team to have. Like, we will criticize opposing teams for having poor discipline, jumping off sides on a missed field goal, like stuff like that. We that's like what we expect from like bad teams, and the Patriots are not a bad team. So that's why it was such an uncharacteristically like.
I mean, like, I can't help but think that Belichick's could be fuming right now. Like,
yeah, and I mean, that's good, like, in a way to, like, I guess that's the thing. Like, I'd rather have this game now than in the playoffs, right? Like, it's better to sort of expose this now. But like, I will also sort of bring me to this now. Like, I mean, this is the Patriots' first road loss of the season. Actually, they were actually 6-1. 6-1 now, 6-0 on the road. And like, the thing is, it's kind of interesting, right? Because like, if you go into the playoffs going forward, right? Like, how much trust do you have in the Patriots to try to win a road game where it might be like this type of atmosphere where like you might not always be able to control the flow of the game? And at that point, like, how much faith do we have in Mac Jones at this point in his career? Doesn't mean he can't develop into a good quarterback over time, but at this point, like, he's sort of like, I feel like this year, like, what we saw out of Mac Jones is what we're going to get. Like, this year doesn't mean he's not going to get better over time, but
I'm not as worried about playing on the road, right? I mean, like, the Patriots were good on there. In fact, they were better on the road than they were at home. So I mean, it's just some like bad mistakes that they made yesterday, right? A lot of those wounds were self-inflicted. So I don't attribute that to the fact that they're playing on the road, right? I mean, yeah, could Mac Jones have been better? Sure, right? Could the defense have been better? Sure. I mean, could the run game have been better? Oh yeah. But I mean, it was definitely still a winnable game, and I don't attribute that to the fact that they're playing on the road. I just don't. I personally don't think that home field really matters as much as you would think that it matters.
I think in the NFL, it matters a lot, though, right? Like, if you play in Arrowhead Stadium, wouldn't you rather face Kansas City at Gillette Stadium than Arrowhead Stadium?
Sure, I'm sure you'd rather play it in Gillette, but I mean, just if you just look at it, right, like, it's not necessarily like a one-to-one thing. I mean, like, especially in the case of the Patriots this year, they're actually a better road team than they are a home team. So like everything you're saying from a theoretical sense makes sense, but when you stack it up against the actual data, right, it doesn't really hold up, right? But then again, it also matters like which stadiums are they playing in, right? So
Also, it matters the quality of the team.
Yeah,
it also matters the quality of the team.
Yeah, if they gotta go to Indy and play again, would I be worried? Yeah, maybe. But like, if they have to go to say like,
I want to say this though, like you're mentioning, they have a better record on the road, and they do than home, right? They're 6-1 at home on the road, and then what, like 3-4 or 4-4 now, or yeah, 3-4 on the road, right? Sorry, 3-4 at Gillette Stadium.
For home, yeah.
Yeah,
sub 500 at Gillette. Like, why would you
but
want
that's
them to play
because
Gillette?
no, that's because they had to face Tampa, they had to face Dallas, right? Those are two of the best teams in the league right now. Like,
And they lost to New Orleans and Miami.
New Orleans, yeah, and New Orleans was pretty good early on before James Winston got injured. They played better teams at home than they did on the road. That's why they have a losing record, right? I mean, if they faced Tampa and Dallas on the road, and they had to play like Carolina and the Falcons at home, we'd be saying the same. They probably win those games regardless, right? So it's the quality of the opposition. That's why they have a better road record than they do at home. They've played better teams at home. That's why. So
yeah. So just kind of like relate to that, right? I think one thing where I wish I did a little better homework before yesterday's predictions was kind of looking at kind of the different, maybe like how the Colts are approaching this game too. And I remember Greg Olson's commentary on the NFL Network broadcast was just talking about how there was like, if you went to Indianapolis, this was a playoff game to them. Everyone, like, they were buzzing, like the coach was treating it, like Frank Reich was treating it like a playoff game, because at the end of the day, the Colts, and we saw this, right, how there was some like palpable, I think, fear on their part in entering the fourth quarter, right? Because the Colts have blown leads this year, right? We know they blew it against the Buccaneers. They were up 10. I think they were up 20 at one point against another team they lost.
Ravens.
This is the team.
Yeah, they blew a big lead against
the Ravens, right? So the point here was like, at the end of the day, the Colts, like, we know that they surged really late in the season. They started kind of slow, and right now, and they've been rounding out pretty much with Jonathan Taylor's just incredible stats. But my point here is, right, this was I think the Colts viewed this like almost like, I think, how we might have viewed like playing against the Bills. Like, this is a prove it game. Can you actually be a good playoff team? Can you play other AFC playoff contenders and beat them? We knew that they beat the Bills. They crushed them 41-15, but the Patriots were kind of their next step there, especially after losing against Tampa. And I think that's one thing that factored in, because at the end of the day, when you kind of look at how we were talking about the game, and I'm not saying that the podcast we had yesterday was like a sample of the entire Patriots, but I think there was more of a sense like, okay, we're doing fine, we're 9-4, we're sitting on top of the AFC, looking really happy. I think this is gonna be another easy walk in the bucket, right? Meanwhile, the Colts are like, we're 7-6. We absolutely need to win this game. This is a playoff game for us. This is a prove it game for us. So I think there's also, and I think the way they started the game, just absolutely explosive, like just utterly throwing the blitz, being physical with their O-line. Yes, a lot of that is excellent management by Frank Reich, but he also kind of made me wonder, was it a case of the Patriots kind of like maybe like not expecting that ferocious of a game by the Colts, right? They're like, yeah, we just played the Bills at Buffalo, and we beat them at their own game with Mac throwing 3 passes. So, that's also something you have to keep in mind. And again, that's what I'm saying. It's really helped, like, if we were to lose that kind of game in that kind of manner, I'd much rather have it be, 3 games maybe before the playoffs, right? So I don't look at this game and just like, I think I can't just look at this game in a vacuum and say we lost on the road against in my opinion, I think we should rightly view the Colts as a playoff contest. Like they'll be, if we play them in the AFC, they're going to be tough customers. They're if we meet them in the divisional or whatever, I don't know when, but my point here is that, we have to see how we play, and that's why the Buffalo game is really important. And I think, again, we can learn from this game. I think this was a good wake-up call for us, and I think that's also going to calibrate how we view the rest of the season. So I'm not really seeing this game and panicking at all, because, like I said, like, we don't play like this every week. This isn't really how we played since. I mean, we haven't really seen this situation being more than 2 scores down in a long time. So I don't really think this is the time yet to push a panic button or really think of ourselves as any less competitive than we were feeling after winning against Buffalo.
No, I don't think anyone is hitting the panic button. I mean, worst case scenario after this weekend will be the number 3 seed, which isn't terrible, but 1 game out. I personally think at this time the 1 seed is gone because Kansas City is currently number 1, and their defense is one of the best since week 8 or week 9. They barely allow any points. I know they allowed 20.
Oh, they didn't do that well against LA though. So.
I was gonna say they didn't do well against LA, but like even despite they allowed 28 points, the Chargers didn't really convert on 4th down. There were 2 out of 5 on 4th down. They had 2 4th and goals that didn't convert on either of them. Like that's the one thing. I mean, granted, one of them was a wide open pass in the first quarter that Justin Herbert threw to Donald Parham.
Well, I mean, also it's more common for teams to go for it on 4th down. So I mean, you're going to see a lot more of it. So you're going to see a lot more failed attempts as well. So you got to take that.
I mean, even from last night, right? Like Carson Wentz had 3 like 4th and 1 sneaks, which was kind of frustrating, but I mean, it worked for them. And also, like I just remembered when he talked about 4th down. Do you remember?
This is where analytics comes into the game, right? Like,
do you remember that 4th and 1 where Mac Jones like just threw a pass that was near nobody on a 4th and 1 that ended the drive? Like that was just a very head scratching decision.
That was, I think that pass.
I mean, no one was open there. If you look at the coverage, there's literally no one.
Of course. I mean, each play is going to be different, right? It's not going to work out every time. But I mean, it's not like before where it's 4th down and the coach automatically goes to special teams. They get the punting unit out. It's not like that anymore, right? If you know that a certain percentage of the time you're going to make it, right? And if that's going to put you in an advantageous situation, in the long run, it's going to put you at an overall advantage to go for it on 4th down, even if there are going to be many failed attempts in the process, right? So that's just the nature of how the analytics and works as a component in the game. And of course, it's getting more and more advanced, right? So you're going to see more and more strategic coaching decisions as a result of that. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's more research that gets done into when it's advantageous to go for it on 4th down, when it's not advantageous. But it is a new and interesting dynamic to the game where you're going to see a lot more 4th down attempts. And I mean, for me as a viewer, it is more exciting to see that, especially when they can convert it and get that 1st down, right? Because if you can continue a drive, and if you can do that instead of just like punting the ball away, it definitely does make a lot more sense, especially if you're not really in a position of the field where if the 4th down play doesn't work out, then your opponent is in an advantageous position, because that's the whole point of punting, right? But if that's not really the case, then hey, it might be worth it going for it on 4th down, especially if you're like past the halfway point of the field, but you're not quite in field goal range yet. I mean, those are scenarios where you'd probably want to go for it on 4th down.
Yeah, I understand that, but I just think that if Hunter Henry just turned his head on the 4th and 1, that pass was supposed to go right to him. If he catches the pass, he's got forward progress for a 1st down. I mean, I would have.
If he catches it, right? All of this is like a hypothetical, right? Like that uncertainty is just a part of the game, right? But I mean, as a coaching decision, when you decide to go for on like 4th down or not, I mean, these are all the things that you consider. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but like going for it on 4th down, you're taking a chance. It's like either way, no matter if it's 4th and 1 or 4th and 10. Like you're kind of hedging your bet with your offense, saying, "All right, we can do this. Here's what we want to call. Go execute it. Let's see what happens." So it does, and that's the case for like any play call, no matter what down. Let's be honest. Like if I'm honest with you, I mean, for example, like like we talked about earlier, the Mac Jones first interception, that wasn't the right option, and I felt like Hunter Henry is your number 1 target in the red zone. So like you would think that the Colts would know that and they would cover that. They did. What happened? Interception. So it's just, overall it's a bad game. I honestly just like to chalk it up as just a bad game, and we're on to Buffalo. Let's just put it that way.
We're on to Cincinnati. Now we're on to Buffalo. So is this going to be dubbed the Saturday Night Massacre the same way that was dubbed the Monday Night Massacre?
This was a 10-point loss. Like that's not a massacre. Like that was a 27-point loss. Like this isn't a massacre at all. This was like a game that they could have probably, if not for the Taylor run at the end, and they get the ball back at the end, it could have been a very different story. So that's not a massacre. Massacre is like if you lose by 27. They haven't had any massacre this season. Their worst loss is 15.
What was the final scoreline of that?
41-14.
Monday night.
41-14.
The Monday Night Massacre?
Yeah, that is a massacre. 27-point loss. A 10-point loss where it was 3 points until a really good and kind of fluky run. I'm going to say it's fluky because I'm sorry. 67-yard runs are usually kind of like there's something went wrong on the defense's end. Like that's not a normal thing. So even for a guy like Jonathan Taylor, that's not like a typical normal run by Jonathan Taylor to go 67 yards for a touchdown. So yeah, it was a fluky run at the end. Like this is not like anything to like really be that concerned about. I just hope, like, I'm a little bit more worried about like the standings now, because everything, like, I mean, you now basically you kind of had like one life to sort of lose, and now you kind of lost that. So now you sort of have to be very sharp for the rest of the season. Like, I mean, Bills, and then you have the Jaguars, who obviously that should be a win, but then you have Miami, and I'm a little bit nervous about that because that game is in Miami, and Miami usually gives them some type of trouble, and they've already beaten the Patriots once. That was week 1. So I don't know. Like, I mean, these next like 3 games remaining on the season, I only really feel confident about one of the 3. That doesn't mean they're going to lose like the other 2, but those other 2 games against Miami and Buffalo, those are not gimmies by any means. I mean, obviously Buffalo isn't, but even Miami, they've been playing really well recently. They're on a 5-game winning streak right now. They're playing the Jets right now. The game just started. So I mean, they're going to be like likely 6 wins in a row, games in a row. Like they win. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, I guess. But yeah, I guess the last segment is just
unless there's some sort of like wild twist where the Bills actually end up losing to Carolina today, and of course then that means we still maintain a 2-game lead. Highly unlikely, but that would be like the wild twist if something wild were to happen today.
Yeah, I guess Cam Newton will have to hope that he can actually win that game, which I don't feel good about. But yeah, let's go into a little bit of a quick prediction segment on some of the other AFC matchups today. So yeah, Bills, Panthers, like all of us are pretty much hoping the Panthers win that game. But like, do any of you actually think that it's possible that the Panthers
I think it's going to be 28-13. Bills win it.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone in consensus? Are we all in consensus that the Bills will likely win this game?
Yes. Bills.
Yeah, it's hard to see them losing 3 in a row. But hey, we'll have to see how it goes.
And I guess Titans, Steelers. I mean, the Titans right now are the 2 seed, but if they lose, the Patriots are back to the 2 seed, at least up to the 2 seed. So that's in Pittsburgh. So I guess we're all going to have to be waving that terrible towel today. So yeah, I mean, that's the matchup. I mean, hopefully, I think that's a game Pittsburgh could win at home, but it'll be tough. I mean,
Pittsburgh has a habit of just making things close when they're like 20 points down. So I could see this also being yet another game where Pat Freiermuth gets like a random touchdown in like the late 4th quarter, and then they like just lose on a field goal or something. But I could see them winning too. That's the thing with the Steelers. They just make every game close. And then when they lose, it's just that more crushing, I guess.
I'm going to go Pittsburgh in this one. I'm going to take my chance on it. Tennessee, they don't have their, the Patriots played Tennessee, and we pretty much ran them out of Gillette Stadium. It was close through in the first half, but then second half we kind of pulled away, right? I think with Ben Roethlisberger, at least there's some chemistry with his receivers. Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, Najee Harris is up there for Offensive Rookie of the Year. So I think, and with Tennessee, no Derrick Henry, which was pretty much their offense, the same way the Colts have Jonathan Taylor, right? So, and I would say Pittsburgh's run defense is pretty good, although they allowed 242 yards against Minnesota on last Thursday night. So I'm going to just say Pittsburgh in a close game. Pittsburgh wins by a field goal.
Yeah, I think it's going to be close, but I'm going to go with Tennessee on this one, 17-16 on this one. I mean, Tennessee have shown themselves to be a quality team. Of course, they did lose against the Patriots, but I mean, like Ryan Tannehill is having a good year, and I mean, I think Pittsburgh doesn't make it interesting, but in the end, I'm going to go with the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, I hope the Steelers win, but I mean, that game is a true toss-up. Like, that can go either direction. So, and the last one that's going to be probably noteworthy is the Baltimore Ravens against the Green Bay Packers. So I guess we also we should be cheering for the Packers because the Ravens are 8-5 right now. So they're still kind of like competing with the Patriots directly. Like, I don't know how the tiebreakers work off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, it's an NFC team, Green Bay anyway. So I mean, I'll be supporting Green Bay.
We would have the tiebreaker on Baltimore because of I believe it comes down to conference record because we didn't play the Ravens head to head. Because after losing the Colts, that's two losses in the conference. But I believe Baltimore has already lost to Cincinnati. They lost to Cleveland
and Pittsburgh.
and Pittsburgh. So that's 4 losses in the conference for Baltimore. So I think that's why we have the or at least the tiebreaker on them for the time being. So that's why I say the worst case scenarios is 3 seed, but at this point the best case scenario is 2 seed if Tennessee loses to Pittsburgh, which I'll be more. Like I said, either way you're still behind Kansas City by 1 game, no matter what.
Yeah, but like, I mean, 2 seed, like at this point, like getting that home playoff game is going to be critical. And then if you have to deal with Kansas City at some point, then naturally that's going to be tough regardless of where you play. Like Kansas City is that good of a team.
Exactly.
And Lamar also, it is possible Lamar Jackson might be out today, or at least with a lot more limited mobility. So, in that case is even more in Green Bay's favor. But, I don't think we should be like that hung. Like, I think, if we have ambitions for this team, we need to expect that we're going to be able to compete against good teams in the playoffs. So,
yeah. The thing is, the Patriots have showed that they can compete. I mean, it's not like they can't. I mean, think about like earlier in the season, like the losses. Tampa Bay came down to a missed field goal. Dallas overtime. Miami just by 1 point. The only one
that was a fumble by Damian Harris in their red zone. So exactly. that was a winnable game completely too.
Yeah, most definitely. And like the one game we said, all right, that was just one in the bin was the New Orleans game, right? So overall, and we've already beaten Tennessee. Remember, we already have the head-to-head on them. We already beat the Chargers, who are in the mix for the playoffs. We've already beat the Bills once. I mean, there's
Cleveland as well. So that's like 4 teams that are like. I mean, Cleveland I think is out of the hunt right now, but they're like still in the mix.
Right, they're in the mix, but like I think they're on the outside looking in. But we've already beaten some of these teams who we could potentially play in the playoffs. So, and as long as you win the division, you're guaranteed 1 home game. And whether you get a first round bye or not, that's a different story. Like 2 seed, 3 seed, it just matters like who you play. It doesn't change where you play, at least in the wild card game, right? So, I would preferably like to have as many home games as possible. I mean, that being said, we beat Tennessee at home. We beat Cleveland at home. Beat the Chargers in California, but that's an indoor stadium. I feel like we would have beat them at Gillette Stadium. That's just my opinion. But we'll just have to see how things really play out. As long as we have at this point, I just hope that we hold on to the division.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, that's going to be. Does anyone else want to discuss anything for this episode?
Oh, in terms of the Green Bay Baltimore, I'm going to say Green Bay by 10 points.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean,
I'm going to go. I'm going to go with 21-14 Green Bay on this one.
Go a little higher. I mean, if Lamar Jackson is limited, I'd say like Packers 34, Ravens like 10 or something like that. Like could be a blowout. I mean. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be our episode for this week. So, yeah, obviously kind of a tough loss. But, yeah, it's not over yet. None of us think it's over. The sky is not falling or any of that stuff. So, yeah, and they're going to be having a big matchup on Boxing Day against the Buffalo Bills. So, yeah, we will be back next weekend at some point to preview this Bills game. Obviously, with the holidays coming up, we'll find our time to do it. But, yeah, until then, everyone enjoy.
Yeah, anyway. Have a good holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. Anyway, stay safe and spend time with the people you love, whether it's family, friends, whoever it may be.
Absolutely. Yep. Stay safe and enjoy the holidays with your friends and family. Until then, enjoy the rest of this week with the games. And yeah, we'll be back next weekend at some point to discuss the Bills game. Have a good one, guys.
Peace.
Take care.